because this is our continent. We are in charge of the future of this continent, and we must build peace ourselves because we live on this continent, and therefore we have a deep responsibility to ensure that peace does indeed prevail. And what they are doing with Qatar, US, or whoever is part of the peace-building process, but it is inherently African. And we must thank and applaud those who are assisting because they are our partners, but we are the owners of the whole process ourselves as Africans.
President Ramaphosa used to address family meetings during COVID where he'd have tough conversations with South Africans. And I think, was there a family meeting between you and President Kagame where you had this tough conversation?
Well, we have family meetings unbeknown to many people who see certain things happening just 2 seconds, 3 seconds. We have family meetings between the two of us, ongoing discussions, and on a speed dial with each other to discuss all manner of things. So forget the psychedelic things that happen in the air. Focus on what we do together to build the peace process on our continent.
Thank you, Your Excellency. President Ghazouani of Mauritania, you have in recent months made some big announcements directly involving the private sector. You signed a new public-private partnership law in 2024 in November. You had a framework with the OPEC Fund in January of this year, and the DREAM project with the World Bank, which you launched in March. Does this shift reflect a change in your philosophy toward the private sector? And how will you be leveraging these projects to energize Mauritanian businesses?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, it is true that in Mauritania, we are in a vision that gives a capital importance of the private sector in the creation of jobs, creation of added value, and make the private sector a locomotive of economic development. Indeed, you know that the pressure has increased on the government for the accomplishment of their mission, and we are actually trying to mobilize public resources. And this reality is obliging the private sector to be a key sector that is essential for financing and also the provision of services in favor of development. We are convinced that the private sector cannot fully play this role if the state is not committed and putting necessary reforms to build an environment that will be more attractive, that will guarantee the legal security of the investments, whether at the national level, international level, more modernization of infrastructure, promotion of human resources. So it's only that the project that you mentioned when you in your question, that is actually confirming our willingness to favor emergence of a dynamic private sector that will bring more growth and also employment as well. Now, today, the private sector has the possibility to intervene as a self-producer of its needs in energy, and also sell the surplus to public companies of electricity through key tools that favor the development of the SME, like the new code of electricity, the new law that we just put together, impact the pact of energy, reform of the public market, the new code of investment, and etc. So our national pact as well of energy that was presented in Dar es Salaam in January during the launching of the M300 program. This is for the private sector to be more involved, and we are around $28.5 billion, and on the 2.5 billion that we projected. So this is a important commitment to allow the production of 100 and 200 megawatt of electricity, IPP and PPP. So now regarding the new agreement, the partnership that we signed with the fund that you mentioned for the amount of $120 million is a support that is directed in the IPP and also the DREAM project as well of $181 million that we signed with the World Bank, that we allow also through the battery of storage to reinforce the capacity of Somalek, and also benefiting a technology and also an expertise developed on the private sector. So globally, to conclude, our economic and social developments can be increased through a dynamic private sector with more ambition and committed with the public action. Thank you very much.
And Honorable Vice President, a few days ago, the African CEO Forum surveyed some of the private business leaders who are in this room and who are participating, and they asked them whether or not they felt that the African Continental Free Trade Area, or like half en français, was having an impact on their activities. Only 17% of the business leaders they surveyed said yes. Are you surprised by these results? Only 17% think the AFCFTA has an impact on their business? And how do you interpret that? That's level of, I guess, pessimism.
Thank you very much. I would first like to express my gratitude to the President Ouattara that allowed me to be with his colleagues here in this panel. You mentioned that in the private sector, we are realizing that things are not quite as we wish that they will be. I think that what was mentioned earlier is so important. The most important is governance, because governance, as we mentioned, is what allows to create the necessary framework for the evolution of the activities, private activities. And I will not go back on what was already said, but what we all wish is that the expression will be done. So it means that the people that need this governance that will be directed in a certain way should say it precisely, because the needs are multiple and are multiform, and is through the collaboration of everyone in all sectors of activities that need coverage, and we should work accordingly to our needs. So I think that if the governance is good, and that the companies and the private sector is able to find ideas, the performances will be good, and this is what we are seeking for. So here is what we should seek. Exactly, the good governance that goes through what the private sector needs as a sign, as value, as need, and that can allow to go further in the result that we are looking for. This is what I can say globally, and this exercise that we are having, for example, is simply something important to help the private sector to provide and also exchange and reach the objectives that we set. And this only can be done if, one, the willingness is there, secondly, the conditions are met, and three, that the performance will allow to reach and meet our objectives. So in Côte d'Ivoire, for example, we put in place a national plan of development on 5 years, and that was also renewed. So this plan take into consideration all the concerns that the private sector have in order to be performant. And the results are, of course, the level of what we were looking for, a rate of growth around 7% per year, which we were able to reach, and the performances that go beyond what we even expected. So here is what we should be looking for. Thank you very much.
Are you surprised that only 17% of these business leaders feel that the AFCFTA has impacting their business?
Yes, well, it is.
Because you're a big advocate of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yes, which I'm about to speak about. It's quite concerning if that is the perception. You know, as I walked in with President Ouattara, President Kagame, and others, as I entered this room, I could smell money. And I welcome this opportunity to sit here and look at people who have money or control money. And as I look at all of you, and I say, wow, these are people who control a lot of money on the continent.
Right.
And I want them to smell the coffee and go beyond their 17% skepticism, because the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a fundamentally transformative mechanism that was adopted by the leaders of the continent. And we should recognize and applaud the fact that the political leaders under the aegis of the AU saw wisdom, and led by President Issoufou, and President Kagame was leading the reform process. They saw wisdom in scaling the fortunes of Africa up and moving us just beyond just talking about politics and the unity of the continent, and wanting to put in place the real building blocks of what will support that unity and the progress on our continent. And that was about the economic growth of the continent through engendering trade, and that's why the African Continental Free Trade Area was adopted. So it is an engine of growth, and through it we'd like the private sector to embrace it, to participate in it, because what it does, it gives the African continent an opportunity to integrate, and it gives business people the opportunity to see the 1.4 billion people market on our continent, and a GDP of the entire continent adding up to $3.4 trillion. Now, with this agreement, we're then able to get the private sector working with the public sector to embark on meaningful projects such as infrastructure, because for trade to have meaning and to happen on our continent, Infrastructure projects must be embarked upon. Roads must be built. Our airlines must work properly. Our ports must work properly. Our rail network must work properly. And this is where the private sector can then come and partner with the public sector, where we can work together. And the public sector is keen, having established or inaugurated the African Continental Free Trade Area, in integrating the continent. I saw the integration of the continent during COVID-19, when together as a continent we integrated ourselves when it came to personal protective equipment, and we set up a supplies organization or platform where we bought things together as a continent. And then we came to vaccines, when the West just kept on supplying vaccines to us, and President Kagame, President Macky Sall, myself, and many others then said, we want to make our own vaccines. And then we started a process of integration of things like vaccines into Africa. So we started seeing integration. And what has that led to? A number of businesses being established. So what I'm saying is, we would like the private sector to follow in tandem with the public sector to embrace the AfCFTA and also be active participants. Now, what the public sector will do is to de-risk, particularly when it comes to infrastructure projects, to de-risk a number of these projects through, obviously, the sovereign financial systems that we have in each country, and allow the private sector to participate. So we are twins, we are pods, and we need to work together. And I'd like to see that 17% skepticism whittling down.
Right.
This is a platform that the private sector must be active in. And the other benefit they will get is that it leads to institutional capacity improvement. It bolsters our skills base, the talent that the continent should have. It opens up trading regions beyond just the regions, but to the whole continent. And this is precisely what we are going to be advocating also at the G20. When it comes to things like critical minerals, we want a critical minerals accord that will enable all of us to manage our critical minerals properly. And we can only do so when the public sector and the private sector move together and work together. So your money should be put to good use. We must not just smell it. You must come and put it to real good use. Thank you.
Thank you. President Ramaphosa, these people are sold. You're preaching to the choir in some ways. We all believe in the dream of the AfCFTA. But the borders are closed. The flights are expensive. We can't get visas to South Africa.
Now, don't be too personal. But the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going to be the pathfinder, the road opener for all that. It's
right.
going to enable all that. The movement of goods, the movement of people, the issue of visas is currently being addressed. And
right.
The pace might be slow, but it is happening, and it is going to happen. It's going to open the floodgate for economic activity on our continent. All and right. I would say, watch this space. It is going to happen.
Thank you, sir. President Kagame, another issue, there are several candidates here for president of the African Development Bank. And this is happening when we just learned recently that President Donald Trump intends to cut about $555 million to the US, the concessional window. So they're going to take over an organization that still needs a lot of funding. But can we do it? And is it the right body to develop our continent, even when the EU, the US, and others are reducing how much they contribute to it? And this, I guess, is related to your earlier point, we can't rely on others.
Well, again, let me start from where my brother, President Ramaphosa, left off. One, we can
That was quite a start with his That was quite a start with la technique. Vous pouvez venir pour enlever tout ça ou c'est pas elle de. Wouh. Attends.
question. The cutting of budgets, cutting of aid, cutting of all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, we Africans, we wake up to this reality when it has been there so many times before, and we start scrambling. What do we do? No, what we need to do is what we should have done many years ago, and still we can do it. There is a mentality out there, it's sort of a mindset in our continent that somebody out there is going to foot the bill of our development. And that has undermined our effort to contribute as much as we can ourselves for our own development. So what we need to do, I mean, we need to do what we started doing. The frustration here for me is, we talked about how I championed the reform and worked with many other leaders on different subjects. But there is a sense of frustration that what we have agreed, even at a continental level, involving all leaders and how regional communities should work, with the AU at a continental level, is not implemented. The systems are so bureaucratic that you imagine they live in another world, not this one that is so harsh to us that we need to be doing certain things certain ways without expecting that somebody will always be kind to us, and that's what we depend on almost forever. I'm saying this out of experience. I have lived in my country, and I see many other African countries go through that. So on one hand, there is everything in our hands to do whatever we need to do and benefit from that. On the other, we are expecting that somebody else will come and do what we need for ourselves.
Right.
So how can this go on forever? You know, we have the knowledge, we have the vision, we have everything. We have resources, and we have organizations, we organize, we have. Africa should be far ahead of where we are now. And we shouldn't take any comfort that some progress has been made here or there. We just need to do what we have to do.
Right.
Yes, and we have all the means to do it. So, so we are actually our own problems. So if we addressed ourselves to this matter that we need to work together, that we need to, I mean, we export raw materials, all right?
Right.
And then import
The finished product.
finished products. We export talent and then get experts coming to give us all kinds of things.
Lines, no. We're here, we're talking normally as human beings to one another.